Alright, in this video I'm going to teach you how to make a quick little saving leaderboard for leader stats just like here. So the first thing we want to do is open up our game in Roblox Studio. And now we're in here, first thing we need to do, add a script in DataStoreService. And I am going to call this script leaderstats script. So now we can start coding our leaderboards. First of all, we're going to need to get the data store service. How we can do that is local data store service equals game get service data store service. And now we're going to need to get the data store itself. So local main data store equals data store service get data store main store. You can call this whatever you like. And then we need to get HTTP service. So how we can do that is local HTTP equals game get service HTTP service. Right, now we need to decide what data we actually want to appear on this leaderboard. So in the game I just showed you, we had stage and rebirth, I think. So we're going to make a table, first of all. We're going to decide what data we want to save. So local default data equals, and then open up a table. And then in here, we're going to add some data. So for the first item, square brackets, and then some speech marks. And in here, I'm going to say, let's say coins equals 5. And then we can say maybe rebirths equals 5. Right. So now we've got our default data. We're going to need an event for when the player joins the game. So game.players.player added, connect, function. And then in these brackets, we want to take the player object. And the first thing we want to do is create the folder itself for the leaderboard. So how we do that is local folder equals instance.new folder, and then a comma, and then player, because we want to put it in the player. And then this bit's important. We have to set the folder name, so folder.name, to exactly this. It can't be anything else, right? You got to call it leaderstats, spelled exactly like that, no capitals or anything, exactly like that. Right, so now we're going to make the values for our coins and our rebirths. You can do this for as many items as you like, but I'm just going to keep those two for now. So local coins equals instance.new int value, because we want it to be a whole number, and then a comma, and then we want to put this in our folder, so comma folder, and then we want to set the name of it, so coins.name equals coins. And then we can just do the same thing for our rebirths, so copy and paste that, change this to rebirths, and then I'm just going to copy that like so. And now we've got our values, we want to actually get the data itself. So how we're going to do that first of all is make a variable called data, so local data, and then we're going to go down 2 lines and we're going to say local success error equals pcall function. Now this is just so that if this data store runs into a problem, it won't crash our script. So now what we're going to try and do is get some data from the main data store. So how we can do that is local player data equals main data store get async, and a pair of brackets, and player.user ID. So what this is doing is it's getting the data that has been stored as the player's user ID. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say if player data, then we want to decode this data because it's stored as a JSON. So how we can do that is player data equals http JSON decode, and then in these brackets we want to put the player data. And then we want to say data equals player data. But what do we do if this player data hasn't been found? Well, just change this end to else and open it up, and we're just going to set the data equal to this table we created earlier, so default data. Right. Now we're done with this, we can set the values of coins and rebirths. So how we can do that is coins.value equals data, and then square brackets and these speech marks, and then coins. And then for rebirths, we're going to do rebirths.value equals data, rebirths. Right, another thing we need to add, which I've forgotten, is we have to say if error, then data equals default data. Right, now if we test our game, we will see that there's been an error because we've not yet allowed Studio to access this data store. However, we have got our coins and rebirths on the leaderboard with our default values as set before. But now we've got them to load, we need to get them to save when the player leaves the game. So how we can do that, if I zoom out a little bit, is we need an event for when the player leaves. So how we can do that is game.players.player removing, connect, function. And in here, we want to take a player object again. And now we want to craft this table with the values from the player. So I'm just going to copy and paste this table, copy the table from up here, paste it down in this event here. And we're going to change the numbers here. So coins equals, and then we're going to change this to equal player.leaderstats.coins.value. And then we're going to change the rebirths to equal to player.leaderstats.rebirths.value. And if you've created different values, like I said you could earlier, you want to make sure that this matches up to here, and that this matches up to whatever you've called your int values. Right, now we've got our data here. We want another pcall function, so local success, error equals pcall function, and then open up this function. And first of all, we want to encode our data because we can't save it as a table. We need to save it as JSON string. So how we can do that is local data equals http:/JSON encode, and in these brackets we want to put our data table. But I'm just going to change this name, by the way, now from default data to player data. And then I'm going to copy this. I'm just going to chuck it in these brackets here. Right, now we've got our encoded data. What we're going to do is save it to our data store. So that's our main data store. So how we can save it is main data store set async. And then in these brackets we need the key, which remember we had the key from earlier. That was the player's user ID. So just put the player's user ID in there, and then a comma. And now we need to put in the value. So this is going to be our encoded data. So just type in data. And now it's going to try and save it to our data store. So now we want to print out if there's an error. So if error, then warn error. All right, cool. Now our script's all done. What we're going to need to do is before we test the game, before we play the game, we need to allow the game to actually use the data stores. So how we can do that is go into our game settings here, go down to security, and make sure enable studio access to API services is on. So turn that on and click save. Right, now we can test our game, so just click play. And now we're in here, we can see that our coins and rebirths are working. And now I'm just going to go onto the server and change some of the values in our player that we set in this leaderstats folder. So I'm going to give us 15 coins, and I'm going to give us 10 rebirths. And then I'm going to go ahead and kick our player from the game. .squiddings::kick. What this is going to do is it's going to kick the player but keep the server running, so that makes sure that Studio doesn't like break our script or anything. So if I just run that, I have now been kicked from the game, although it's not loading, I can't move. So now what we're going to do is just stop the game, and then hopefully when we load back in again, you can see we've got our coins and rebirth as we saved them before. So that was how you can make a saving leaderboard in Roblox Studio. If you found this helpful, then please subscribe. Get me back in the YouTube algorithm. I am begging at this point. Anyways, see you in the next one.